Today, I want to talk about the second chapter of the Pope's Apostolic Exhortation, Sharing the Light of Faith, and finding our joy in it. In the second chapter, he is particularly focusing on challenges that we experience in our church, in our Christian community, within our own selves, that come from two directions. On the one hand, the challenges come from the environment in which we live, the intellectual environment, the socioeconomic environment, the whole world as the environment within which we live, and the problems of the world that particularly challenge us as people of faith. And that's the first type of challenge that he brings before us in this chapter. And the second kind of challenge that he brings before us in this chapter are those challenges felt especially deeply in the heart of the person who wants to share their faith, or the person who's called to share their faith, which is everybody. Every person who has been baptized, every Christian, every person in the faith. So, in the second part then, he wants to talk about what it is that is weakening our ability to be transformed in this missionary impulse for conversion and for evangelization. So I'm going to begin then with the first of the challenges. He is saying that is the context of the world in which we live. And he puts it into three different categories. First of all, he says, there are certain things that we as Christians, as people of faith, people who love God. Now, you don't want to forget that in Francis's mind, people of faith include as well those who are not of the Roman Catholic tradition, people who are not of the Christian tradition. It includes as well people who are of other religious traditions. And so he is trying to pull us all together and say, in God's name, as the one who is the creator, the dreamer for all of humanity and for the cosmos and for world's history, we need to say no to certain things that are going on, because it is a challenge to our faith that these things are going on. We need to confront certain other things, not just say no, but actually take a stand. Confront the thinking that is going on behind it, the kinds of attitudes and behaviors that have developed because of it. Certain kinds of things we need to confront, all of us as people of faith. And thirdly, we need to preserve certain things that are going on, that have been going on. And those three things are challenges of our world today, to us as Christians. First of all, Francis is very concerned that people recognize that this is not a sociological analysis per se. He wants to do a brief presentation of what he perceives to be the challenges to today's people of faith from the world. And so he's doing an analysis from that perspective. So it is not a sociological analysis, it is rather an evangelical discernment. How are specific things that are happening in our world's history today actually interfering with or undermining the way that we can clearly and authentically and without difficulty or with less difficulty present the light and joy of the gospel runs counter to God's plan. So he wants to help us recognize and learn more carefully to discern those activities of the human community which are part and reflect God's plan, from those activities which interfere with and undermine or cloud our ability to experience the joy in God's plan. So in an evangelical analysis, he only wants to claim to consider from a pastoral perspective certain factors which can restrain or weaken the impulse of missionary renewal. And so he's doing this as a pastor, as someone who loves the people with whom he lives and works and of whom he is a part. So he says several times in this document, one place in particular he says, the Pope loves everybody, the rich and the poor, the weak and the strong. So this is the pastoral perspective. He's trying to bring us to understand from whichever place we come, how we can clarify our understanding of how we interfere ourselves, or we allow to shine through our activities the God's plan in our world. So what do these things that he's going to focus on do? Because he's not going to focus on the range of things that support evangelization in particular. He will talk about it indirectly. But this chapter, he is talking about the threats to evangelization. So he wants to talk about those things that threaten the life and dignity of God's people. And so it's clear that it's all of God's people. What threatens the life and dignity of humanity, of human communities, of our history as we progress in the world? These affect those directly involved in the church's institutions and in her work of evangelization. So while we as church are concerned about the sufferings of all of humanity, we also need to recognize that those things that affect and contribute to the sufferings of all humanity, they also affect us. So, what are some of the challenges of today's world? And so he begins by identifying in global terms what is going on, not in one place in the world. And so we as Americans, we need to be aware that we stand to be thinking for ourselves about how this applies to us. But so do Africans, and so do New Zealanders, and so do Europeans, and people of all over the world, Latin Americans. So this is not specifically directed at first world people or Christian people or any kind of people. This is humanity's people. This is what we are experiencing. The majority of people in the world are barely surviving from day to day. And he wants us to know that this is happening all over the globe. It is not only happening in the southern part of the equator. It's happening all over the world. Majorities are suffering day to day. Majorities, not minorities. Second, the hearts of many people are gripped by fear and desperation. This is terrible. This is a paralysis. When people's hearts are gripped by fear and desperation, their imagination is stunted. Their ability to experience love is paralyzed. We are in an age of knowledge and information, all of us. We are in an age of knowledge and information which has led to new and often anonymous kinds of power. And this power is being used. This anonymous power is being used to pass out information, to interpret information, to apply information, to expect a certain kind of future. This is being done anonymously. Now, did people intend to do that? He doesn't get into that. He just simply says, this is what is happening. Anonymity is not helping the human community. So we need, all of us, everyone of faith communities who want to protect the people of God, we need to safeguard the value of human life all over the world. And to do this, we need to do three things. First of all, we need to say no to a whole series of things. First of all, we need to say no to an economy of exclusion and inequality. An economy. The economy is based on these people getting it and those people not getting it. These people in and benefiting from it, those people not in and not benefiting from it. Where the powerful feed upon the powerless. They need it. They can't do without the powerless. Where human beings are considered consumer goods to be used and discarded. Where people have a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power. Think about it. A crude and naive trust in those who are wielding economic power, because that is in the hands of a very small minority, every place in the world, in which we end up incapable of feeling compassion at the outcry of the poor. So he is saying those who are poor because they are excluded, because they are outside the realm of power, and those who are included because they have the power, because they have the possibility. All of us are ending up incapable of feeling compassion at the outcry of the poor. And so this is why this is an evangelical analysis. We need to say no to the idolatry of money, where people forget that the current financial crisis, we're talking about 2008, the current financial crisis originated in the denial of the human person, where the gap separating the majority from the prosperity enjoyed by those happy few is seen as inevitable. The majority can't enjoy the prosperity. The happy few can enjoy it. And that gap is widening between who can enjoy and who cannot. And the hugest majority is in the group that cannot enjoy that prosperity, where the thirst for power and possessions knows no limits. $1 million is not enough. 55 suits is not enough. 250 pairs of shoes is not enough. The thirst for power and possessions, it knows no limits. Third, we need to say no to a financial system which rules rather than serves. Financial systems are created by human beings. Yes, they're put together in pieces. Yes, they come together in larger systems and blocks. But financial systems exist to serve the people for whom they exist. And so we need to think about that. Financial systems need to serve the majority as well as the minority. So, Francis wants to directly address financial experts and political leaders. Who are these financial experts and political leaders? Think about it. These are our elected officials. These are our governors, our despots, they are our kings, they are our emperors, whatever they are throughout the world. These are our political leaders. But then we also have those persons who control the financial halls of the country, the region. We need to say to he needs to say to those financial experts and political leaders with as the same kind of pastoral concern, to not to share wealth with the poor is to steal. The goods of the earth, the energy of humankind, the resources of our globe, the resources of intelligence, the opportunities that the future gives us, this is our wealth. It needs to be shared with everyone. To not share with the poor is to steal from the poor. And on the other hand, the Pope wants to address in a pastoral way all those who are feeling excluded. This is a Pope who loves everyone in the name of Christ. The rich must help, respect, and promote the poor. not just charity concern in a 19th century interpretation. Genuine help, genuine respect, genuine promotion for their good. The rich must help, respect, and promote the poor. We need to say no, fourthly, to that inequality which spawns violence. Beware, he says, of that focus on security which tolerates exclusion and inequality in society and between peoples, which provokes violent reactions. Tolerates, encourages exclusion and inequality either in society or between peoples. Banking on, supporting certain kinds of competition and exclusion between different groups of people, that is promoting violent reaction. He says, when a society, whether local, national, or global, is willing to leave a part of itself on the fringes, no political programs or resources spent on law enforcements or surveillance systems can indefinitely guarantee tranquility. There's no end to it. So that is what we need to say no to. It's a kind of no that challenges us to think about how we have been a part of it. We have allowed things to blunt our consciences of our responsibility to love, respect, and promote the poor. Secondly, he says in this section, we need to confront some challenges, and the first of those are attacks against faith, any religious faith. Attacks on religious freedom, persecutions directed against Christians, widespread indifference and relativism that is promoted. That's an attack. The proliferation of new religious movements that tend to fundamentalism or that propose a spirituality without God. He says, these, without a certain shrewdness, fill a vacuum left by secularist rationalism. Doesn't this remind us of the words of Jesus, when one devil leaves, 7 more come in? We need to confront, on the other hand, that situation in which priority is given to the outward, the immediate, the visible, the quick, the superficial, the provisional. Oh, we're just going to do it for this month, but it lasts forever. Provisional. Where there is a growing sense of the deterioration of ethics, they're not going to remember. They're not going to hold themselves accountable. They're not thinking this is right or wrong for the society. Where there's a weakening of the sense of personal and collective sin. We participated in promoting the desire for these kinds of things, this amount of things, that left other people structurally, economically poor. The steady increase in relativism, the absolute rights of individuals versus the community, the thought that all information is of equal importance. Rather, Francis says, education is what is needed. Thought, examination, discussion, dialogue. Education must teach critical thinking and moral discernment. That is a work of evangelization. Thinking, promoting the development of our own moral conscience, of our own understanding of those systems and structures and attitudes that dehumanize, that leave people out. We need to confront the individualism of a postmodern and globalized era which favors a lifestyle that weakens the development and stability of personal relationships. Move. Don't stay connected with your families. Don't stay connected with your culture, or which distorts family bonds, which, for example, continuously ridicule certain persons within families, certain styles of relationships within families. We need to preserve an authentic Christian humanism. So this is the third area in which Francis is describing threats to our humanity. The immense importance of a culture marked by faith cannot be overlooked. Now notice he's saying by faith, not by Christian faith. It can be Christian faith. It can be Muslim faith. It can be Jewish faith. But a culture that is marked by faith contributes much to the human opportunities and the growth of all within its umbrella. An evangelized popular culture contains values of faith and solidarity. That's true no matter what the faith. It is capable of encouraging the development of a more just and believing society. It is capable of possessing a particular wisdom which ought to be gratefully acknowledged. So we need to gratefully acknowledge the wisdom that comes out of cultures other than our own that are also shaped by a certain form of faith. Each culture and social group needs purification and growth. And so it's here that he talks about the Catholic and Christian culture. And this is very interesting. He says, in the case of popular cultures of Catholic peoples, we see deficiencies which need to be healed by the gospel. Machismo, alcoholism, under which he lists all kinds of addictions, domestic violence, fatalistic superstitious notions, and private revelations. All of these, he says, are parts of what have been inserted deeply into our popular culture through in the context of our particular faith tradition. We need to be reformed of this. We need to preserve authentic Christian humanism because of the challenges from urban cultures. This is very interesting and reflects the work that has been done in particular by the Latin American bishops in their 5 gatherings of the Synod since Vatican II, where religious challenges in urban cultures, where religious dimension of life is expressed by different lifestyles and daily rhythms from that of the countryside. So we need to recognize that in many cases, the faith that has been brought to families, that has been brought to certain parts of the world or certain parts of our country, came from a countryside culture. But that area has developed significant and deeply rooted urban cultures. And these urban cultures are now developing a whole different sense of how they are looking for the experience of God. Where an evangelization capable of shedding light on these new ways of relating to God, to others, and to the world around us can occur. Where we are seeing inspiring, essential values to human life in the urban cultures, where we are seeing dialogue to differing subcultures. So this is happening in the cities, in urban cultures, where if they're going to exist, they must exist with one another. And so he's saying, evangelization capable of achieving these 3 things: light on new ways of relating in the city to understand our experience of God, is inspiring values, and dialogue between differing subcultures, where all of that is offered intentionally. We need to preserve authentic Christian humanism in the proclamation of the gospel, which will be a basis for restoring the dignity of human life in these contexts. For, as he says, Jesus desires to pour out an abundance of life on our cities. And we recognize, this is so interesting, that a uniform and rigid program of evangelization is not suited to this complex reality. So the form, the method, the words by which we evangelize in cities is going to be different from the way that we evangelize in the countryside and in different parts of the cities. So that is, in summary, the first part of the threats to missionary impulse of evangelization that Francis is calling us all to embrace. That is the first. That we need to say no to certain things that are undermining human life and growth. That we need to confront other situations, thought patterns, structures that are undermining. And we need to develop new structures or reshape structures. And finally, we need to embrace and support those forms of humanism that support faith. So that the second part of chapter 2 is focused on the temptations faced by pastoral workers. Now keep in mind that the whole focus of chapter 2 are threats to evangelization coming first from those situations and the way we are involved in those situations that face everyone in the world, and how we, as Christians, as people of faith, as human beings, we all need to say no to things, confront things, endorse things. But in this second part, Francis is talking in particular to those who see themselves and desire to communicate to others the way that they see themselves as pastoral workers, as evangelizers, as those who would share the joy of the gospel that they have experienced in their lives. So he's not talking about a small group of people who are working in a parish or are doing certain kinds of work for the poor or the sick or the unification of the peoples. But you will see as you read this section of chapter 2 that Francis does not want to take up this topic without first recognizing how much pain and shame we feel at the sins of some. And when he says this, it is so clear that he's talking about the sins of Christians, of communities of faith, of people in public roles, the sins of some, but that they must never make us forget how many Christians are giving their lives in love. And so, on the one hand, he is trying to encourage us to take up the joy of loving one another, which Christ is calling us to. On the other hand, he is also calling us to say, yes, I and some of us have sinned. We have caused scandal and shame and great pain in our families, in our communities, in our world. And we have a chance with Jesus, through the Holy Spirit, with one another, to be converted from this situation, from our sins. Discernment must be done in honesty and love. That's the first thing he says. I am aware that we must create spaces where pastoral workers can be helped and healed, because we've been injured by seeing the sin that has taken place in our own world, in our own church, in our own faith communities. And we need to be healed and helped. We must create spaces where pastoral workers can have faith in the crucified and risen Jesus, and where that faith can be renewed so they can pull themselves together again. We need to have spaces where there can be sharing of the most profound questions and concerns of daily life, and these happen routinely. It's not a secret. It's not something we ignore, but where we can share our concerns and questions. And we need to create spaces where a deeper discernment about our experiences and life itself is undertaken in the light of the gospel. It's an interesting way to put it. So temptations faced by pastoral workers, first of all, he says, some temptations come because we are inclined to an inordinate concern for personal freedom and relaxation. We want to relativize or conceal our Christian identity and convictions. We are attached to a few projects or vain dreams of success. So, in this section, in these several paragraphs, he gives specific examples of how we don't want to work hard. We don't want to give up for other people, give up our comforts or our conveniences or our patterns of life. We want personal freedom. We want relaxation. And so he's challenging us to know that this is a temptation. Do not allow ourselves to be robbed of the joy of evangelization. We don't have to give in to this temptation. Another is excuses. There are evils in the world, and there are evils in the church, and these can diminish our commitment and fervor, but they don't have to. That's a temptation. Defeatism stifles boldness and zeal and nurtures querulous pessimists. That's a temptation. To be defeated before you even get started. He says, Christian triumph is always a cross, yet a cross which is at the same time a victorious banner borne with aggressive tenderness against the assaults of evil. What an interesting image. A banner borne with aggressive tenderness against the assaults of evil. And so I would refer you back to that theme that he developed in chapter 1, in which he was focused on, I think it's a prologue, in which he was focused on the Old Testament image of God. God as the warrior on our side, who is fighting for us and with us. We are skittish in commitments. This is a temptation. We're self-protective. We avoid face-to-face encounters. We're suspicious of popular religiosity, which is incarnate, that to some of us looks too bright, or it looks too shiny, or it looks too sweet, or it looks too negative, or, all of these, he says, this is incarnate. Different people have different ways of doing things, and they don't all have to be the same. So he says, popular religions, when they bring popular expressions of religious piety, when they bring to light the community's faith and support the community, this supports the community. Everybody doesn't have to do it that way. We need to find true healing and fraternal love capable of finding God in every human being, whether we would do it that way or not. Capable of helping us open our hearts to divine love. Capable of tolerating the nuances of life in common, not just sitting on the sidelines, so that we want to get in there and be with the people, capable of seeking the happiness of others, not just sitting on the sidelines, just as our Heavenly Father does. And so here again, the theme that he has over and over again. These are pastoral challenges to us from a Pope who loves us. Another temptation is spiritual worldliness. Sometimes we are so concerned with an ostentatious preoccupation with liturgy, with doctrine, and with the church's prestige that we forget the people. Sometimes we are so obsessed with programs of self-help and self-realization that we don't know how to pray, to let God into our hearts, to be transformed by the gift of the Spirit. Sometimes we are so caught up with management skills and styles, statistics, plans, and evaluations that we've forgotten who we are, how we feel, what we need. God is on our side to help us grow in our humanity. And when these kinds of things stunt our sense of our love of God and our joy in sharing the gospel, this is spiritual worldliness. This is to deny our history as a church when we do these things. It's the history of the liturgy. Yes, it's brought much to us over the years. The history of doctrine, the history of the church's status in the world, in world cultures. Yes, that's a wonderful history. But our history is glorious precisely because it is a history of sacrifice, hopes and daily struggles, of lives spent in service and fidelity to work. It's not a glorious history as the people who are overcoming every part of their humanity. Another temptation faced by pastoral workers is the warring that goes on among ourselves. In our quests for power, prestige, pleasure, and economic security, this against that, these against those. This tends to stoke a spirit of exclusivity, a spirit of creating an inner circle. We tolerate forms of enmity. We tolerate division, calumny, defamation, and jealousy among ourselves. This is so hurtful. We need to be healed and grow from this. This is a temptation. So he has two different sentences in here. He says that I picked up. Let everyone admire how you care for one another and how you encourage and accompany one another. And second, ask the Lord to help us understand the law of love. So he does not make it easy to love one another. He shows us that we've got so much to learn about how to do this. Another temptation is that we forget that the minority in the church are those who are ordained. Those who are ordained to be of service to the majority, not the other way around. An excessive clericalism which keeps laity away from decision-making. This is a temptation in the church. An inadequate formation of laity for leadership roles, for leadership thinking in every area of the church's life. This is a temptation. Weak or poor evangelization of professional and intellectual life. The work of laity for forming the world and the values in the world and transforming values in the world. This work of education, of evangelization of those workers, of the laity in this sense, has been weak. Another temptation is not to acknowledge the indispensable contribution of women to society and the church. So he has three things that he says about our Christian community. First of all, we don't acknowledge, haven't, and we need to recognize that this has been a temptation, and is. Not to acknowledge the indispensable contribution of women to society and the church. Not to create broader opportunities for a more inclusive for a more incisive female presence in the church. Not to press for women's presence wherever important decisions are made. Women hold up half the sky. Another area of temptation for pastoral workers is to fail to respond to youth. We have had a weak response as a community to their concerns, to their needs, to their hurts, to their problems in the usual structures, their problems in schools, their problems at work, their problems in learning how to be married, their problems in learning how to deal with violence in their cities. So, these are concerns of youth, and we have inadequately responded to the youth in their concerns. But he says, there are youth who are responding in our cities and in the countryside and in our parish communities. And he attributes this to the Holy Spirit blazes new trails to meet their expectations and their search for a deep spirituality and a more real sense of belonging. Belonging, yes, on God's terms, and yes, on their terms. There remains a need to ensure that these associations for youth actively participate in the Church's overall pastoral concerns and do not see themselves as simply appendages to the other efforts of the Church. The final temptation that he focuses on is our inattention to the scarcity of vocations to the priesthood and consecrated life. Ineffective, inadequate attention. Lack of pastoral fervor perceived in those who are priests or are in religious communities. We have not focused on that enough. The importance of living parish communities who pray insistently for vocations and propose priesthood or special consecration to young people. How amazing and wonderful, and what a gift of the Spirit to the whole community that is. We've been inattentive to the strength of that. These are temptations to our Christian community. Finally, Francis says, challenges exist, but they exist to be overcome. Let us be realists, but without losing our joy, our boldness, and our hope-filled commitment. Let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of the missionary vigor that the Spirit calls us to, and which images in our world today the resurrected Christ. Thank you.